Look at this. Look at this. Sam was kind of looking down at something, and his head was to the right, which gave us a profile of the dapper-looking hair day he's having right
Handsome.
now. I mean, look, we'll we're all friends here, so we'll say one thing or the other if it's bad, but you got to call balls and strikes. Sam's looking great today.
Yeah.
Good morning, Sam.
Jason, who's this guy they let into the studio? Like, there's two people. There's another guy here with you today.
Sam, his name, he goes by the name of Dave.
Uh-huh.
It's Carmichael Dave.
That's me.
Yeah.
Hey, what? Friends can't compliment other friends on their hair?
No, I mean, friends are allowed to take a little vacation too. So welcome back.
Hey, thanks, pal. Anything happened while I was gone?
I don't want to connect dots that don't exist, but you left and the Kings world fell apart.
So look, I will say this. You and I talked a few times off air during the whole saga. By a few, I mean what were we, about 10 times while I was on vacation. We had phone conversations and what's going on. I'll just lead this way. I'll let you kind of slide into the interview, if you will. Looking back on everything that happened, and then of course we'll move forward. Why was Mike Brown fired? Who was behind it specifically, and what other things are going on in the franchise that we don't know about?
Oh, okay. We're gonna soft pedal it.
Yes. Take the floor, Sam.
Dave, they're 5-1 with Doug Christie.
They are. Okay, so I'll ask you the question we've been asking everyone else, and we've been talking about a lot. You don't have to crucify Mike Brown to compliment Doug Christie. Sam, is it that they're not necessarily one's better than the other, but is it just the difference between the two that's hitting and landing with this squad? What's your read on this?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of being sarcastic just because 5-1 is good. It's changed the mood. My read is, I mean, there's so many layers to this thing. And again, I know you guys have gotten into it a lot, but I think anytime you have a coaching change for one at base level, you do have a shift of energy in the room. And now all that energy is not positive. Like I've written, I don't actually think that De'Aaron Fox in particular was thrilled with how this went down. But, Doug is a positive guy who has done a really nice job so far. It is very notable, and he deserves to have it highlighted that the team has played well late, because that was such an issue. If you even get away from all the drama of the Mike Brown firing and just focus on the actual basketball and the X's and O's, that was a big time issue. And so for that to turn around has been big. The Miami game the other day was very impressive. For them to be down, whatever it was, 17 with 8 minutes to go and not throw in the towel and fight the way they did in double overtime, that was impressive. Defensively, you're seeing, I think, a few different things, a little more aggression, a few more traps, and Doug on the sideline from a spirit standpoint being a lifter, whereas Mike Brown had obviously become very frustrated with his team's lack of execution. And what now seems to be clear that, at least for parts of the locker room, was, a message that wasn't always getting through and was driving him crazy. So that's how I see it.
Sam Amick joining us from The Athletic, and of course his appearance brought to you by our friends at Jiffy Lube. Sam, I know we're going to obviously get more into the Kings and kind of Doug and their future, I'm sure, but just one thought on Mike, on Coach Brown. What do you think his future is? He's been a guy this has happened to him before. Coaches get hired to get fired, and he's well respected. Just, where do you think is the next phase for Mike Brown in his future?
Unclear. He's got plenty of options, and obviously because of that extension last summer, financially things are very good for him. His immediate future, I think, is enjoying a little bit of a breather in the Sacramento region. And then from there, it is a matter of, where might he want to. I would anticipate jumping on somebody's bench as a lead assistant. But who knows? I mean, he could wait until the summertime and let the coaching carousel, kind of spin a little bit and see if there's a head job that he wants to go after. His reputation is in just a wonderful place, in my opinion. Even with the team struggling, I do think objectively, most people around the league are gonna, even with the 5-1 stretch here, are gonna look at this Kings team and say that, that ultimately what got them was roster, kind of deficiencies, and the fact that those bared out a lot during, the parts of the season that were tough on the team. He certainly, and he'll tell you himself, was, largely responsible for some of this stuff, but his reputation's good, and we'll see where he goes. And I mean, I hate to say it, when you get cast aside by the Kings, given their history and their reputation, it doesn't have the type of mark on a resume that it might in other places.
Sam Amick of The Athletic with us. Let's talk about De'Aaron Fox. One lingering thing here, wasn't that long ago, Rich Paul was in town, and the big talk was, is De'Aaron going to leave, and extensions and all that. And what worried me about firing Mike Brown was not the firing. I think it had to happen, but it was the way it was handled and the things that were said, but most importantly, the things that were not said. I was not here for the press conference because there wasn't one. And that meant that the people left to speak on it were the players. The players were the de facto PR spin that the media had access to. And I know De'Aaron had a, I don't know if it's ever really been publicly put out there, but there was a little bit of a press boycott last year from De'Aaron that had nothing really to do with the press. And you put that together with the fact that he was getting a lot of barbs thrown his way for being behind the Mike Brown firing, and finally had to kind of go out on Twitter and say something himself. Is there a chance in your mind, or are you reading anything that this whole thing may have actually worsened things rather than made them better with De'Aaron and his camp as far as relationship with the team?
I do. I'm gonna rib you a little bit, Jay. Don't you love when he comes back from vacation and asks things about, like, things that I wrote an entire column about? This guy's.
Oh, that's right. You did write about it as I lead you perfectly into the answer. Sorry.
I love
my bad.
No, yeah, I do. I mean, I think everything you laid out is accurate. The backdrop, and we talked about this on the phone the other day, the backdrop of last season is nuanced and just a small part of the context, but it is, we almost disagreed about highlighting it publicly. But the quick backstory there was, there had been some questions from the local media about why the big elite players on the Kings were not talking after bad losses. And then when Mike was asked about that, he essentially said that's a PR thing. De'Aaron, I think frustration at the time was that he had not been asked to speak after at least one of those bad losses, and then felt like he was getting portrayed as a bad leader. As a result of that, the theme and the dot that you are rightfully connecting is the organization not publicly having his back in times of criticism. And that was the case back then, that I think in his mind, and that was the case this time around. The lack of a press conference, I don't mind sharing, guys. You know this. We've been doing this for so long in town. I do admittedly get a little exhausted. I'm not trying to be the guy who highlights stuff like this year after year when things aren't good, but it's just not a healthy move to not have a press conference. It absolutely reeks of, you are running from a choice that you made, and you don't want to be transparent or open about why you made it, and nobody is willing to step up and grab the microphone. I think,
and you're leaving it on the players.
You're leaving it on the players, and at first and foremost, it should be Vivek, who wasn't even in town when this choice was made. I've had others tell me, like, you're letting Monty off the hook too much, and I get that, but we all know the power dynamics with this group, and we know that Vivek runs this team, and he from what I've been told, was the driving force behind the decision, and so I think he should have stepped forward and talked about it. I actually peeked at his Facebook page the other day, and it's like there's all kinds of Vivek commentary on his Facebook page, including, by the way, I think 6 weeks ago, a comment he made about Mike being the best coach in the NBA. So, that was a bad look. I feel bad for some of the people within the organization, because I'm sure if they called all the shots, they would have had a press conference and spoke to the fans. It just does irk me, any organization, from the Kings and to the rest of the league, when you get this sense of like, oh, we'll take your money and we'll hope that you keep coming out to the building, but we're not going to treat you as quote unquote partners and really tell you what's going on and why we're doing the things that we're doing.
So Sam, the beginning of that was this might have impacted De'Aaron. What do you think the front office thinks about De'Aaron in their future? Everything they've pointed to is intentions of, keeping him around and making him a long-term piece of this, but things can change. It's fluid. What do you think the front office thinks about with the deadline coming up and just some options ahead for them on him?
Yeah. I mean, I am still of the belief that the writing is on the wall, even more so after the firing than before. The tricky thing with De'Aaron and why this is going to be so interesting to watch unfold, seeing how the rest of the season goes. And then I don't expect him to get moved before the deadline, certainly. But is that his personality is such, he's not Jimmy Butler. You know what I mean? He's not going to, kind of rampage during practice and go at his own teammates because he's unhappy. He's not going to, recruit the media to come to Sacramento and do a national television interview like Jimmy did back in the day with Rachel Nichols. If you guys remember that kind of incredible moment, that type of stuff is not going to happen. It's going to be just more professional. I think I might've said this on the show before. Somebody with the team recently described De'Aaron to me as a gentleman, meaning that like, he's just going to handle himself in a certain type of way. But that doesn't change the fact that it, even with the 5-1 turnaround, like the tough part for the Kings and their fans, and the understandable part, in my opinion, for De'Aaron is that his aspirations are bigger. Like, it's not, he said it openly multiple times. It's not just scraping into the playoffs. That is not what he wants to do in this league at this stage of his career. So really, unless they are able to show that they're a team capable of getting into the second round, maybe a conference finals by the end of this year, I personally don't think the calculus changes at all.
Conference finals wow. Then it becomes a situation where, okay, you have to make this decision at some point. As a front office, you have to have some sort of read, or you would hope so. Even if you want desperately to keep De'Aaron Fox, if you're going to lose him, you got to max his value. So is that on Monty and Wes and that front office to be that in tune with Rich Paul and De'Aaron's camp to say, look, we don't want to move you, and you don't want to leave, but you've thrown the gauntlet down, whether you agree with it or not. You've thrown the gauntlet down on your requirements. Let's try to get some specifics here so that we can help send you to a place you want to. Because, by the way, there's no guarantee. You never know trade. There's no guarantees not going to Washington or Charlotte or whatever. I mean, I know he's not, but you get my point.
Yeah.
Do Monty and friends need to be incredibly aggressive on that to cut their losses if there are losses to cut?
Yeah, you can make that argument for sure. If you go back to the Tyrese Halliburton trade for Sabonis, that surprised people, right? That happened ahead of a time that we didn't think a big move was coming. And you could argue that element of surprise, if you take all the emotion out of it, just from a chessboard standpoint, is the way to go here. I think there are people around the league who will absolutely have the belief that the Kings should move De'Aaron now, that his value is never going to be higher. Now, I don't think I agree with that, because the teams where I think you could extract the most return are not most of them anyway. I don't think are in a spot to be able to do that right now.
Sure.
The Spurs, for example, I think are trying to see this season through, have their fun little moment in Victor Wembanyama's year number 2, and then, reorganize in the summertime. If you force them to come after De'Aaron right now, I'm not sure you would like the response that you get. So with that in mind, I think strategically it's fine for them to play out the year and see where it goes, but it might get messy, because if he doesn't make All NBA, if he makes it clear not only that he doesn't want to sign the extension, but he doesn't want to be in SAC anymore, then the power dynamics, with every passing day and week and month, they do shift more toward his camp than the organization.
Sam, as far as the way they're playing now, as you said, 5-1, winners of 5 in a row with Doug here, and 5-1 overall. Is that new coach bump, or is there something here? Because I think we all thought they were underachieving a bit. Some of the metrics suggested that, but just curious what you think, as they go forward the next 10, 15 games.
Yeah, some of that's the new coach bump. I mean, it's funny, of all the different subplots, I feel like I have a lot of clarity on almost all of them. The one that admittedly still tugs at me a bit, and that I think the optics, it's fair to say, don't look great in Mike's direction, is the Keon Ellis development here. And the idea that, that he wasn't getting consistent time before. It was pretty widely known Mike was frustrated with essentially, inconsistencies on the defensive end, times early in the season when the feeling was that he just wasn't competing like he had last year, and this coaching staff wanted him to be accountable. And I get all that, but man, like, you see the way that Keon has played when he doesn't have to look over his shoulder, and when the coaching staff is just saying, no, you are a big time important part of what we're doing. That's a pretty key development here. And then from there, I don't know where to point other than you got to give them credit. They've won a few games without Fox. DeRozan has had more of a closing lane with Fox out these past couple of games. Domas has been doing what he does, which is, put up monster numbers, and he played 50 minutes the other night. So they've played well. Again, I say all that, and I do wonder how our visit is going to go next week, and the week after, because this schedule is about to get absolutely brutal. And if they, lose 60-70% of their games for the next 2 weeks, you mentioned the honeymoon period earlier. I mean, I think that's going to be over here as well.
Impossible question for you to answer, so just give me your best guess or read. But do you feel like these last 5-6 games under Doug Christie has done anything to ebb the aggression of the front office, or is your read that they still understand this is an imbalanced roster that does need some help, whether it's Cam Johnson or whomever we're talking about?
No, I think it's as aggressive, if not more than before. And to their credit, it's funny, like when ESPN wrote their piece on the Mike Brown firing, and they had an anonymous quote that was, like nobody wanted to fire Mike.
Yeah.
It struck me because first, part of me is like, well, somebody did, like,
right.
But I only bring that up because I think there's a spirit with this front office of like, they are looking in the mirror, and they are, understanding the part that they have played. They have a pretty clear-eyed acknowledgement of the fact that a lot of times it just comes down to, changing the coaches is the easiest thing to do. I mean, if Vivek had decided, for example, to change the front office instead of the coach, that's a tricky thing to do 5 weeks before the trade deadline.
Right.
The logistics of that are different. So I think they know there's pressure on them, and they know they've got to do something. And yeah, I continue to hear that they're involved in a lot. I mean, they're trying to improve the team.
You get that same sense, like, is this a league-wide activity thing going around? Or I agree with you, Sam. I think the Kings are going to be players in this deadline, but you get the sense a lot of people are going to be aggressive here, and with Jimmy Butler out there and some other potential names too.
Yeah, it's to me, it's mostly everybody below Jimmy. I wrote about Jimmy today, but I think that's going to take a while to play out. The Heat don't like what they're getting so far. I think Jimmy's going to be back. The Heat players, and I reported this, they were even told going into this when Jimmy was suspended, it was almost from a PR standpoint, like, let's not completely burn the bridge with Jimmy publicly here, because he's probably going to be back in our locker room pretty soon. So I think that's got to play out. But all the same names, we've been talking about before, whether it's Cam Johnson, Kyle Kuzma, Zach LaVine, Brandon Ingram. There's a lot of teams that look at players like that, and like Cam is in a different category. Teams are willing to give up a lot for him. The other guys, it's, they like what they bring to the basketball team, but they have big contracts, and they require they put more stress on your payroll, if you will. So, but yeah, I think it'll be active.
And do you think when it comes to Keegan Murray last year being a basic untouchable, Devin Carter, that type of, is your sense what seems to be most people's sense is that they're trying to do a Kevin Herter picks, maybe Trey Lyles, I don't know, type of thing, or are you starting to hear sniffs that the Kings might be coming off some of their favorite sons?
I'm not. I mean, I heard, and I haven't confirmed this, so I won't share the team, but I mean, I even heard chatter the other day about a team pushing for Keegan again and just being told no. So some of those favorite sons remain. From there you get into the you can make an argument that like with the Fox, Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan thing not popping like they had hoped, and some of the duplication and skill sets there, that maybe they should do something with one of the latter two guys. But I'm not hearing that as of now. So yeah, I think it then comes down to the draft capital and how much of their future are they willing to compromise draft wise to get something done. I mean, the Nets tell people that they've been pushing they want 2 firsts for Cam Johnson. I think ultimately it's going to be 1, probably unprotected, for whoever gets him. But the Kings, as far as making the money work, I think it's still mainly Herter and Lyles.
Are a lot of teams, are draft picks still gold right now for teams? I mean, we've seen some that just have so many future, they control the draft lottery or the draft the next couple of years. Are people still trying to, acquire as many draft picks as possible? Is that a theme, or players overall?
No, they are, because it's the more that the vice grips of this CBA have been twisted and made it harder to function, especially when you have big money guys on your payroll, the more important it has become to have rookie scale deals with productive players. Like, as much criticism as the Nuggets get, most of it justifiable, for not, going completely all in to surround Nikola Jokic with talent. Their philosophy had been, no, but if we hit in the draft with Christian Brown and Peyton Watson and Julian Strother and guys like that, that's the cheat code to make it work in terms of the CBA. They still have one of the highest payrolls in the NBA, and they have tried to exploit the pick process in a way that makes their whole thing work, if that makes sense. So yeah, picks are king for sure. I mean, OKC, that's why it's absolutely remarkable the spot that they are in, and why they recently won, going away, our front office ranking story that we did, is that they're not only a title contender, but they've got a gazillion picks. So yeah, I think, picks are still very important.
We'll wrap on this because, you went in a little bit today on the inner workings of how this was all handled. I went in quite a bit on Monday, my first day back, in the same way, but I want to try to be fair here. And I want to see, sometimes we'll bounce things off of each other, and we've not talked about this off air. Is it fair to say that one thing about Vivek that might hit a little different now is that we go back a few months, not that long ago, and there was a lot of national pressure for Vivek to get off his rear end and sew up Mike Brown, who deserved the extension. And the thought was that Vivek was hesitant to do so for reasons that weren't made necessarily clear. And in the end, in part because of public pressure, some people came back to the roost that were out of town and got the deal done, but that maybe it wasn't Vivek's first instinct. And then it turns out a few months later, he eats 20, 30 million and ends up firing the guy. Is that a fair read?
Yeah. I don't know which part you're kind of specifically pointing to, but
I'm trying to draw the line and say, look, he's gotten, and the franchise has gotten a lot of heat from you, from me, from others, and I think completely deserved.
Just get up and say it. I like, that's the part. Transparency wins the day, man.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, just get up and say it. You don't need to run from it.
Yeah.
You're well within your right to say that. I gave him the contract, but it wasn't real pretty during the summer. I mean, that part's
Right.
not a secret.
Right.
It wasn't pretty. I think my opinion is that he you just said it. He gave it reluctantly, even resentfully, if you will. Now, if they would have won ball games, he would have gotten over it and moved forward. But he was not a happy camper at the end of last year. Like, okay, congrats, you beat the Warriors in the play-in, and that's the type of stuff that makes Vivek very happy. But then they don't make the playoffs. The offense wasn't what it was the year before. That pissed him off. Just say it. You can't have this much power within this organization and try to pretend that you're not running it. It's fine. Like Mark Cuban for all those years would sit on the elliptical before games and literally have media members. It was a little silly, but it worked. Come in and talk to him pregame and ask him anything about the Dallas Mavericks, because there were no illusions about the fact that Mark Cuban ran the Dallas Mavericks. What I don't understand with this group is how they try to pretend that it's something that it's not. And, that is the thing. There's nothing, the way you laid it out is completely accurate. And you can even, they were upset about the way Mike's side handled negotiations. And I can hit it on the nose too. They were upset about the media side. We were part of the group, we wrote about the pressure that was on them and the fact that it was going to create a distraction if they made Mike go into the last year of his deal without an extension. But that stuff happens every year in the league. So anyway, I
guess I'm just saying nobody's saying, and I don't even know if we should say it, but with all, and I'm one of them going in on them a little bit. I guess my conscience is hitting me saying where I'm like, well, should I be saying more too that, well, maybe Vivek was right.
Is your conscience hitting you, or the Kings?
It's just my conscience in the sense that I always want to try to be fair, and I always want to try to, I don't like the narratives of all or nothing. We just talked about this earlier. Should I be saying, huh?
What does your conscience say on your caller ID? Who comes up as conscience?
A lot more syllables. I guess I would say, should I be saying more? Hey, maybe Vivek was right in the summer when he didn't want to extend Mike Brown, and this firing kind of vindicates him a little bit. Is that even an angle? I mean, honestly, tell me. I'm wondering. I'm debating that in my head.
No, I think that you can blame both sides. The spirit of this group and the relation. I actually wish we had more time on this. The relationship was, kind of soiled in the summer, and it's on both sides. I think, honestly, sure. I don't want to speak for anybody. My feeling is that after a couple of years, Mike started figuring out, oh boy, some of the Vivek experience does have some of the stuff that I heard about. And I don't think he was rocking with him nearly as much as before as a partner. But he felt, because he got the team to the playoffs and had 2 winning seasons, which they hadn't had in almost 2 decades, that he deserved an extension. And I agree with him. I do think the organization has forgotten a little bit how dark it was and for how long that went on. So I think on one side that, like you talk about that word partnership, it had kind of already unofficially fallen apart a little bit in the summertime, and it was quiet. You know what I mean? And I think Vivek had his own gripes with Mike. Oh, he was obsessed with the offense, was upset that it wasn't what it was before. And then, yes, succumbed to the public pressure, gives him the extension. But the accusation from the outside and, yes, people involved, is that the Kings don't value coaches, and they basically panicked when things got a little uncomfortable. Willie Green has 6 wins for the New Orleans Pelicans, yet, and this is probably a terrible comp, because to lift the Pelicans up as an incredibly functional organization is not, but like, there's some coaching, the coaching world looked at this and said, he lost 5 games, right. You are making it clear that you don't value stability. And not only that, this is another subplot. I mean, I like Doug a lot. I hope he does well. But, when you leapfrog guys like Jay Triano for the job, that's another red flag. It just, it looks like you're just going to do what is comfortable. You're going to try to fool the fans a little bit with all the beloved Kings that you surround the organization with. And then you're going to kind of exile the people who you deem, kind of non-compliant, if you will. That's like Mike Brown he put his heels in. He was like, yeah, you know what? I know a lot more about basketball than you, and I'm going to do it my way. And I think over the course of time, that clearly upset the guy who was cutting the checks.
That's Sam Amick in an interview that I'm sure will be shared quite a bit, as they always are. You can read his coverage along with the rest of the good folks that cover the days of our lives here in Sacramento at the Athletic. Sam, appreciate it, and we'll look for that caller ID to hit, and we'll talk to you soon, buddy.
How do you spell conscience again?
See you next week,
Sam.
dude. Bye. We're way late for a break. When we come back, I think it's fair, by the way. I think it's all fair.
Yeah.
I think it's all fair. When we come back, 4 down.